Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for another CASEpeer Conversations webinar. I'm Gabriela Cubeiro, the CEO and co-founder of CASEpeer. We're practice management software built for personal injury law firms. And my guest today is Connor Beer. He is the Director of Business Development for AccuMed Healthcare Research. And AccuMed is a data analytics platform that provides attorneys with verified medical specials and other services to maximize the value of their personal injury cases. Welcome, Connor.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be on the webinar today and excited to go through this process with you guys.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about AccuMed Services. I think it's a really cool company, really cool technology, and their goal is really to set up personal injury attorneys for successful negotiations and ultimately for the best possible results for their clients. So let's dive in. Don't forget to find that question box in the webinar. For those of you joining us, go ahead and ask your questions along the way. We'll either address them then or we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So Connor, tell us about AccuMed. I know I've, a couple times when we first met, you had to explain it to me. Tell us, what is it exactly that you guys do?
Yeah, and honestly, it is a good question because a lot of people try and group us in different buckets. A lot of people think of us as a life care planning group. We're not life care planners. Some people think of us similar to a physician in the fact that we give estimates, but we separate ourselves more so as a data analytics platform. So what we're doing is we're looking at a 30-mile radius around the client, and we're pulling data from all of the physicians and facilities within that 30-mile radius. And what that can do in cases is it can help enhance the value of really any case that has a future recommendation for surgery. And the reason being is that these estimates are comprehensive, right? So as you can see, on this example, we're going to include everything that's going to go into surgery: radiology, PT, anesthesiology. All of this is going to help build up the value of the demand for any case that has those surgical recommendations, or even just treatment, even if it's non-surgical, RFAs, chiro, PT. These reports come in at a low cost, and what they can do is they can actually help really add the value and help you hit those policy limits that you're shooting for. We can also help you battle those insurance companies when they're trying to reprice your medical bills, especially if the case is on a lien. I think we all know, Allstate, State Farm are becoming notorious for that type of service where they're saying, hey, look, this case was treated on a lien. It's billed unreasonably. And it's like, as a plaintiff attorney, who do you turn to for collateral to help back up those medical damages? And that's something that where we can jump in and say, actually, you're wrong. Based on what everyone charges, this is the reasonable rate.
Yeah, so if I understand it correctly, and of course you can elaborate, but essentially you're looking at average costs based on, the 30-mile radius of where the client lives. And based off of that, you're providing really accurate estimates on what these bills are. And the thing that I think is so cool, and why I wanted to share this with our audience here today, is that sometimes you get those surgical recommendations, or even if you are able to get those recommendations through maybe a provider that will provide it, I still think that being able to provide the insurance company potentially with this detailed report that's really looking at anesthesiology, looking at some post-op care, right? I mean, you guys go into a lot of detail in these reports.
Yeah, exactly. And to go back to what you said originally, when we say reasonable value, we're looking at the 80th percentile of billed charges. So, the average would be 50th. And what that is the usual customary rate, which a lot of legislation deems anywhere between the 75th and 80th percentile. And so, we're looking at the higher upper echelon of what those charges are. Also, we have a lot of clients that are starting to now not even take the doctor's recommendation or not take the estimate that the doctor might give because it is incomplete. The guarantee that physician is going to do a future surgery or do future treatment is not guaranteed. They could move to another state. The client can move somewhere else. Like get hit by a bus, God willing, that doesn't happen, but you just never know what could actually happen. So they can recommend the surgery, but to price it out isn't something that they were taught in medical school how to do. They don't know what other providers charge within their area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really point. And it's interesting. So, we're kind of getting into what the value of verifying medical specials is. And the one thing that I think is interesting that you've highlighted, it's not just for future, but also for current meds. So what's the value other than the simple repricing? Is there other value to verifying those current or existing medical specials?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is, looking across the country, everyone has different legislation, as we all know, based on medical specials. Focusing on California, we've actually been getting a good amount of calls where the client knows that their medicals are inflated, right? So they've got inflated medicals, but the amount that insurance company is trying to reprice them down is astronomical. So, if you have $150,000 in medicals and they're trying to reprice them down to 60, that they're high, but you also know they're not as low as what they're pitching from an insurance perspective. And so if we come back and we say 110,000 is the reasonable value, case settles at 110 on the medicals, you can then go back to the lien doctor and say, hey, look, you billed $150,000. We were able to settle it for 110, but where's a reduction here? And you can also use it as a negotiation tool post-settlement.
That's really cool. I actually think that's really interesting. One of the reasons that people really love using CASEpeer is our lien negotiations tracking, and that in and of itself gives people a lot to go with to a doctor to say, hey, typically we're settling these cases and paying out at 80%. Let's just cut to the chase and focus on that number. But to actually have that verified by an outside service, that's actually also a very interesting angle.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if you can look at it from a third-party perspective, we're a neutral observer, right? We're just giving you information. We don't have a hand. We don't have a play in this. The data is what it is. The numbers are what they are. We don't change them. We don't manipulate anything. They come straight from government. We have, 5 billion patient encounters in our system. We have 1.3 million medical professionals, and then I think 4,400 facilities, which cover about 97% of the U.S. population.
That's really interesting. And one of the questions that came up when you mentioned the lien providers as well is, are you guys focused on, for those lien providers, you guys are grabbing just, again, anyone and everyone that you have access to, and you're not focused specifically at people providing that service on a lien basis, right?
Yeah, I mean, the issue with getting data from straight liens is a lot of times they are cash pay business. So there's not a lot of data on them. And so retrieving data like that is something that we're starting to look at in the future, is to work with, nationwide lien companies that have all of those doctors, and we can actually incorporate all of that data into our system and just beef up the data. But that's something that we're looking at into the future. But yeah, something we plan.
That sounds exciting. We have a couple questions coming up. Some I'll save towards the end, but one of them is interesting because I think it does help clarify what you guys do. So one question is, do our clients need to be treated with your healthcare provider network to get these reports, or does that matter? So please, can you answer that question for us, Connor?
Yeah, of course. So we actually aren't a healthcare provider. We don't have healthcare providers in our network. We have data. So we buy government data. We get the specials of, what is the historical value of this surgical procedure, right? So we're looking at it from a data perspective. So we don't have healthcare providers within our system. What we rely on is the recommendation from the provider themselves. So if Dr. Smith in Los Angeles says, hey, client's going to need an ACDF and they're going to need RFAs, and you say, well, doc, I need an estimate, or I need to find out what is the cost of that. And they might be able to give you some numbers, but not all the numbers, or they don't feel comfortable, or the client's obese, or they're elderly, or they're a smoker, but you still want to include the price of the future meds. That's when we would step in.
Got it. Yeah, thank you. I think that's an important question to clarify because there's a lot of similar great services that might be more on the healthcare provider network and things like that. So it is really good to clarify. So actually, this leads really well into the next question I wanted to ask you is it's not really just a service generating the report and so on. You guys really are a tech platform and really heavy on the data analytics. And you actually have a new pilot that I think is just launching or just launched. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, no, we're very excited about it. This is really a very accessible platform where anyone has access to it. You can get in there, you can search procedures right away without any restrictions or logins or anything like that sometimes nobody really wants to go through. But it takes you directly in there. It really allows you to manipulate the frequency and duration. So if you're looking at a recommendation from a physician, it's your opportunity to say, this is what the physician recommended. I'm going to enter it in this portal. In 2 days, this portal is going to spit out a report that shows me exactly what this estimate is worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. So after this webinar, everyone, Connor, if you can drop that link, if it's something that's available now, you can drop that link into the chat and you guys go check it out. It's very neat. I played around with it a little earlier this week. Awesome. So when do most law firms that you work with, when are they usually using your services? Is it pre-litigation, litigation? When do you recommend that they reach out?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I get regularly, probably on a daily basis. And honestly, the answer is both. From a pre-litigation standpoint, a lot of people don't want to spend money, and that's understandable, in pre-suit. And we understand that. But we're not thinking about it as spending money. So if you're going to spend $500, which is the cost of a pre-lit report, and you're going to make an extra $20,000 on it, is that beneficial to your case? And a lot of our, especially from a volume perspective, a lot of our clients use it there because that data and that information will transfer into litigation, and then we'll disclose an expert, and then it will be backed in depositions and in trial. So that's where you get into the litigation standpoint as well. So sometimes we jump in pre-litigation, and sometimes people just pull us in litigation when they need to disclose an expert.
Yeah, I mean, look, with the cost of filing a case and starting litigation, of course, if you can cut to the chase and go into your negotiations process with all of the key data at your fingertips, wonderful, right? If it helps level the playing field and show them that you're prepared, because I'm pretty sure that these insurance companies are probably looking at similar data. And so they're coming to the conversation with this, with these numbers. Is that an accurate assessment, Connor?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well, because, historically, defense companies have had these types of services, as you all know, but a lot of times they're using Medicare rates, right? They're using proprietary information. No information can be proprietary if you don't list your sources and your methodologies. It can't be admitted because you don't know where it's coming from. It could be coming from, something that's not valid or something that's not legitimate. And if you can't prove where the data comes from, then you might as well just throw it out.
Mm-hmm. So I love that.
Yeah, I think from a perspective, that's really where we can provide collateral that really hasn't been around on the plaintiff side.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing that you touched on with litigation is that you guys can help on the expert front, right? You guys have experts that you work with, is my understanding. Yeah,
so we have experts across the country. It's also something that we're continuing to build. So, we'll be recruiting experts. Right now, we're almost complete with our expert network to where we built a platform that's a two-way communication between our operations team and external experts. Our experts have to go through a rigorous process in order to become an expert witness. They have to go through 2 depot-style interviews and pass with flying colors. But these are highly credentialed experts that have trial experience. If they don't have trial experience, then their credentials, really speak for themselves. And they've been in situations, high-pressure situations, but just don't have a track record, which sometimes can be a good thing.
And let me ask you this, what's the process like to getting them familiar with your reports and the way you present the data? Presumably, you guys kind of give them the data, show them how it works, and they then will be able to speak to it from an expert's perspective.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a pretty rigorous process. It can be anywhere from 2 to 3 months until they're comfortable with where the data comes from, all of the sources. They have to read through all of the depot transcripts. We've been in 30 trials thus far in our time, which our company's created about a little over 6 years ago. And so in that time, we've had 30 trials. And so they're looking at all these depot transcripts, and they're talking with our current experts and finding out situations that they've been in and the hardest questions that they've been asked, that might throw them off. And so we start to focus on those tougher questions in those depot style tests.
That's cool. One thing that I always ask when it touches on expert witnesses is, are these experts that are agnostic, so that work both ways for both plaintiff and defense, or do you guys, are they focused one way or another?
We have some that do both. One of our experts has only done plaintiff. I think that he has been involved in only one defense depot, and then we have another person that is strictly right down the middle. And that's something where it helps her with credibility. We have no accusations of bias, which I think is something that a lot of plaintiff experts struggle with, is that bias piece. And, that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. I more and more I hear people talking about that. I know, one thing in CASEpeer is, tracking expert witnesses. And one of the things when I'm training people, I don't train them so much, but when our client success team is training and working with law firms, focusing on litigation, the place I think that expert witness tracking is really most valuable is that you can go in there and look up a history with that expert and see, wow, like State Farm uses you all the time as a defense witness. You've been in 15 other trials that my firm has done over the years. That's a great opportunity to bring that up and potentially attack their credibility, right? So I like that idea, and I was curious what your guys' take was on it.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that we're probably 85% plaintiff, 15% defense. The times when we're getting pulled onto the defense side is a lot of places where legislation is really good, and you see physicians that are taking advantage of that legislation. And so, we've had plaintiff attorneys introduce us to defense attorneys because they're so scared that those physicians are going to get legislation changed or thrown out, and it won't be as beneficial for those experts. And so a lot of times that's when we're jumping in on the defense side, trying to keep these physicians in check because they're just billing outrageous amounts, and it's getting back, to some of those lobbyists that are saying this is out of control. And so we're trying to help check that market.
That's very interesting as well. I like that. Okay, interesting. I wonder if we have any follow-up questions to that in the audience, please throw those in. One question that came up, I don't know if you want to tackle this one. What is the best resource or book or website for Medicare rates for particular treatment? Because you guys focus on that 80%. Are there resources or anything public out there for Medicare, or is that something that you guys could provide if someone specifically asked for it?
I would say CMS would be that Centers for Medicaid, Medicare Services. Anything with them, that's good. We don't focus on Medicare rates. We focus on universal rates, which includes everything. We look at bill charges, which is important to note. We don't look at reimbursement rates from United or Aetna or Cigna. But what happens is every physician in the country has what they call a fee schedule, and that's what their bill charges are. And so that's what we focus on is their fee schedule, and that applies to CMS, that applies to United, that applies to Aetna, that applies to their cash pay business. So everything at their fee schedule is really what our focus is.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Perfect. Well, so one thing that came up in a conversation with an attorney, not necessarily about AccuMed, but should attorneys be concerned about this potentially establishing some pricing precedents in personal injury like we've seen over the last few decades, obviously in work comp? Is that something that they should be concerned about with AccuMed?
I don't think so. All of the information that we have is very confidential. We'll walk through a lot of our case results go through a conversation style, results conversation saying, hey, here's what we found. This is the information that we have. And people use it in different ways. They just want to find out, I don't know what people charge in this area. I don't know what the difference is between Los Angeles and San Francisco and how much prices vary across, multiple different ancillary services. When it comes to work comp, it's obviously quite a bit different. You have set fee schedules pretty much, everywhere, and they're all different. And so, we've looked at that before, but, it plays more into PI for what we do, mass tort. Even some medical malpractice is something that we've done before in some of the bigger cases. And so, we can really be used in a variety of ways under the injury field.
One thing you mentioned that actually is really interesting, that for law firms that are getting into a new market or a different state, those numbers can vary wildly. And you might be getting bills thinking they're off the mark, either too low or too high, and getting a gut check off from your service through AccuMed actually is another way that people can kind of harness you guys and get a feeling for if the numbers are right or wrong.
Yeah, certainly. And we have set fee schedules for physicians in the past that actually gives us a lot of credibility in trial, knowing we actually work specifically with physician groups, funding companies. Funding companies use us pretty regularly when they go into new states and they say, hey, we need to find out, where does this physician sit, amongst his peers from a bill charges perspective.
That's really interesting. And I can imagine that does build your credibility as, again, you're not just looking at the attorneys, you're looking at the space really in a holistic way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about some feedback highlights. I know when we spoke before a few weeks back and over the years, you've shared some pretty great stories of people utilizing your reports. And so I just really wanted to give you an opportunity to share some of those, because sometimes that's really what crystallizes how people can harness you guys.
Yeah. I think I always like to go with the most recent ones. Everyone's skeptical of a new service, right? And something that they've never heard of. And, let's be honest, attorneys, what doesn't, what works, don't fix it. So, I think the easiest comparison to tell you is it's like introducing the cell phone to people who know landlines, right? Her grandparents may have gotten a cell phone and they say, I have a perfectly good landline here that works fine. I can receive all my calls. They're not looking at the fact that they might be able to be on a golf course, and receive a call or whatever it might be. It just makes you more efficient. It can be more cost effective. But one of the stories that I just had was just that. We're starting to introduce our product in Nashville and throughout Tennessee. And we had a client that said, all right, I'm going to give you guys a shot. I have $6,000 in prior meds. And this physician didn't exactly recommend surgery, but they did say at some point they might need a rotator cuff repair. Was not very exact with the recommendation. So he said, I want to go ahead and put in a rotator cuff repair. So we went into our portal. He entered in a rotator cuff repair. Insurance company 2 days later paid the full amount. He ended up settling the case 2 days later for $120,000.
I love that. I love stories like that, because now everyone watching is going to expect to be settling their cases for $100,000 or more, right? Every single one.
Well, what the insurance company actually told him was that they said, this is transparent. In these reports, we list all of the methodologies. We list all of our sources. We give them the information they need to go to their boss and stipulate and say, this is the cost of future treatment. This is where the information came from. These are all the providers that they query.
And you mentioned that you're going into a new market. Are you guys fully nationwide now, or are there certain markets that you have more data for? What does that
So,
look like?
I mean, we have data across the country. It doesn't matter if it's South Dakota. It doesn't matter, where it's at. And what happens is if you're in a rural area, we'll start off at a 30-mile radius. We'll go to 60. We'll go to 90. We'll go to 120. If we don't have enough data, we will go national and apply a geographic adjustment factor for your area. And so, we're now in 33 states. That doesn't mean that we're, doing tons of work in those states, but we have had cases in 33 states. And so again, this is just something that is new to a lot of attorneys. And sometimes, it gets received differently. And sometimes, it gets pushed away because it is so new. So.
Yeah, and to be fair, it certainly makes sense, right? We're talking about plaintiffs' attorneys that are, if they have to invest $500 or whatever upfront, right? They're taking a risk. They don't know what results they're going to get. But I wouldn't be here talking to you, with this audience if I didn't really believe that there's value that AccuMed offers.
Thank you.
So we've got some feedback here on costs. Can you break it down? What do you guys, do you want to dive into price a little bit more and tell us about it?
Yeah. I mean, it's simple, but it will probably raise more questions, but that's okay. So the platform that I'll put in the comments or in the feedback at the end is a $500 report. It doesn't matter how many procedures you put in there. If you want to put an ACDF, an RFA, a Chiro, it doesn't matter. You can build up as many procedures as you want on those reports. Each report is $500. And that's what we call a standard report, is when you submit it on our portal. You also have the option of sending it over to our team or directly to me. And what we'll do is we'll break down the note for you. We'll look at the recommendation and we'll build the report ourselves. A lot of times people use this more if the recommendation is pretty complex or complicated and they don't really understand what's actually being requested by the physician. And so that's an area that we'll jump in. We call that a custom report, and that's charged at $950. If you want us to look at historical medical bills, the way we charge that is $500 plus 1% of the medical bills we analyze. For example, if you send me $100,000 in medical bills to be reviewed, we're going to usually take up to 2 weeks to get that completed. And, 1% of the 100,000 is $1,000 plus 500. So you're looking at a $1,500 charge on $100,000 in medical bills.
And certainly, I know that's a lot to take in, everyone, and you can always follow up with Connor later. We've got a great question here, which is super fair, right? For smaller firms. I think that it's a really good point. Do you work on liens? I'm guessing the answer is no, but I did want to throw that out there because it's a great question.
Something that I've really been pushing our executives to do. I think it's a great idea. And we actually are looking at applying. So, call your funding companies if you want us to work on them. We are open to, we have worked in Georgia where we actually applied our reports on a lien, where they filled out the information, their doctors actually broke it down, and we applied it to the lien. And then lien company goes ahead and pays us, but then it's already applied to the lien, right? So they go at risk, just like they do for surgical recommendation or surgical procedures now. I mean, the case they only get paid if the case settles in the plaintiff's favor, right? So it's the same thing with the report.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And then just to dig into this a little bit more, that portal that's available to everyone, of course, it's not as detailed as what it would be with your team sitting down and putting together something super comprehensive. But my understanding is they can go in and use that portal to get like a ballpark number. Is that accurate? Actually,
it's the exact same. So the only difference is that you're pretty much using our data, almost renting it from us, right? So the reports are going to come out the exact same from a custom and a standard. So if you select ACDF, you're going to see a breakdown of every single line item. It's not going to be in the numbers yet, but it's going to show you each line item that will be calculated for costs. And so what you receive from a standard is going to look the exact same as a custom. So whether we do it or you do it, it's going to come out the exact same.
Okay, cool. So that's one way that people can kind of go and get familiar with the information that you guys are piecing together.
Yeah, it's cool to get on. You can check it out. It's very, very easy to navigate. We have people are telling us that submissions usually take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to
Okay. And then you were saying, it takes 24 hours, or are they seeing results right away?
Yeah, so sometimes, we can rush fee anything. If you need it right away, we can rush it for an extra charge. But, typically if you submit it on our portal, it's going to be a 48-hour turnaround. So you'll get it back in 2 days. Okay.
Perfect. Before we move on to the next slide, which I think we've gotten to some of this already, but is there any other feedback that kind of jumps out at you that you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that you battle is the physician piece, right? People will ask who our competitors are. Our competitors are physicians, in all honesty, and that sounds kind of crazy. But the problem with physicians, and physicians will admit this is the reason they don't like to give estimates, is because they don't want to be cross-examined on why they said an anesthesiologist charges blah, 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 or PT. If they're giving a comprehensive estimate, where are they getting those numbers from? They might have a friend, they might have, 2 people they know, but that's not a large enough sample size to be able to say this is a reasonable amount, because those 2 people that they know could be charging at the 150th percentile, or they could be charging at the 20th.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
That's really interesting. That's a great point. I mean, especially if you have a lean provider or something doing an estimate. I mean, if you're, I don't know if Kaiser provides things like that, but it's different if you're going to something that's set up that has a lot of this data, but it's not something that the provider themselves might have. Very good point.
I think the opposition actually appreciates these reports because it legitimizes the recommendation for surgery. They don't think that you're just jacking up a rate and the physician's trying to help you hit a policy limit. You're actually bringing in a third party to legitimize the cost. And they like that, because then you're giving them all the information that they need in order to say, all right, this is right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Absolutely. So what's the best way for someone to try you guys out? I think you're going to share a link here in the questions in a little bit, right?
Yeah, I can actually do that now. I don't know. I'm not sure where the questions are.
It'll be on the right-hand side. If you it might be hidden in the very right corner, and we'll you track that down. But look for that, or there was a link to the website. If you go to the registration page, and we'll have links to that in an email that you'll get following this webinar as well. So, but it looks like you found box. I saw you were typing. So
I am gonna drop it in right here, right now.
Perfect.
And if this does come in the comments section, where you can actually reach out and you can talk to our team in the comments section, go ahead and put in CASEpeer, and we'll give you a 20% discount on that report. And so you'll get that at a $400 cost instead of $500. But really, the easiest steps are, you can get on our portal. You can talk about it. If you have a case that you want to talk about, historical, I'll also put in my email address in here as well. So you can email me about your case, and I can go over it with you and let you know. A lot of times also, if you want to just find out, hey, is this a reasonable bill? I can do a gut check for you, and I'm happy to do that for first-time customers.
That's awesome, Connor. I appreciate that. We have someone, you went over it a little quickly. People are interested in the discount. Can you share that again, exactly how they can tap into that?
Yeah, so whenever you're submitting a request on our portal, there will be a section where you can say comments or questions. In that comments or questions section, just enter CASEpeer, and I'll let our operations team know that each person that does that will be getting a 20% discount on that request.
Awesome, Connor. Thank you so much for doing that. That's really lovely, and I think it's a great way to let people test the waters, right? Like, I love the analogy that you made about the rotary phone or the home phone versus the cell phone. That's something, of course, on the case management, practice management side, we see as well. And it's something new. It's something really interesting. And if it works for a case to bring in more value, it's worth a test. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me today. I also wanted to share a screen here with your email. So if anyone wants to reach out to you directly they can reach out to you here, or likewise, Gabriela at CASEpeer.com. Please feel free to email me with any questions. But of course, if it's related to AccuMed or verified medical specials, that's probably better to send to Connor. But anything practice management related, case management software, please never hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to interface with our law firms.
Well,
Connor, thank you so much for joining me. Oh, yeah.
You have a much better headshot than I do. I need to start stepping up.
Yeah, we need to. Well, I've got some tips. Tips.
I'll take all of them.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's such a joy to bring these conversations to you. Please look out for the next one. Hope to come together. And Connor, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being our guest today.
Yeah, no, thank you all for having me. And let me know if you have any questions. Always happy to answer anything.
Perfect. And I'll also drop a line here. If anyone happens to be joining us interested in learning more about CASEpeer, go ahead and click that link as well. And we'll see each other all next time at our future conversations webinar. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.